The fluorescent lights in the conference room buzzed like angry wasps as my boss, Patricia, slid the termination letter across the polished mahogany table. Her manicured nails tapped impatiently against her coffee mug, the one with "World's Best Boss" printed in fading gold letters that now seemed like a cruel joke. "I'm sorry, Sarah, but we're restructuring. Your position is being eliminated." Her voice carried no trace of the remorse her words suggested. I stared at the letter, the words blurring together through my shock. 15 years. 15 years of 60-hour weeks, missed family dinners, and sacrificed weekends. 15 years of building the marketing department from a one-person operation into a profit-generating machine that had increased company revenue by 300%. Restructuring? My voice came out smaller than I intended. But the Morrison campaign just landed us the biggest client in company history. The presentation I designed will be handled by the new team. Patricia's smile was razor thin. We're bringing in fresh talent, younger perspectives, younger. The word hit like a slap. At 42, I was apparently past my expiration date. What about my projects? The Henderson account? The rebranding initiative? Marcus will be taking over your responsibilities. She gestured toward the 28-year-old who'd been hired 6 months ago, the one who spent more time updating his LinkedIn profile than actually working, the one who'd taken credit for my ideas in 3 separate meetings. The betrayal cut deeper than the termination itself. I'd mentored Marcus, shared my strategies, introduced him to key clients. I'd treated him like the younger brother I never had, and he'd been plotting my downfall the entire time. I see. I stood slowly, my legs unsteady. I'll clear out my desk. Security will escort you out. Standard procedure. Patricia was already turning her attention to her phone, dismissing me like I was nothing more than an inconvenience. The walk to my desk felt like a perp walk. 23 pairs of eyes watched as I gathered 15 years of my professional life into a cardboard box. Awards, photos, the coffee mug my daughter Emma had made in art class with "World's Best Mom" painted in crooked blue letters. My hands shook as I packed each item, acutely aware of the security guard hovering nearby. Marcus appeared at my cubicle, his expression a masterclass in fake sympathy. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I had no idea this was coming." "Liar!" The word screamed in my head, but I couldn't summon the energy to voice it. Instead, I looked up at him, this boy who was younger than some of my blazers, and saw the truth in his eyes. He'd known. He'd orchestrated this. "Take care of the Henderson account," I said quietly, placing my company laptop on the desk. "They prefer their presentations in landscape format, and Mrs. Henderson has a severe peanut allergy. Don't order from that Thai place for client lunches." He nodded, probably not even listening, already calculating how my corner office would look with his motivational posters and his collection of energy drinks. The elevator ride down felt endless. In the lobby, I caught my reflection in the polished granite walls. A woman in a wrinkled suit clutching a cardboard box like a life preserver. When had I started looking so tired? When had the lines around my eyes become so pronounced? My phone buzzed as I reached my car. A text from my husband, David. "Working late again. Don't wait up." Again. It had been 3 weeks of working late. 3 weeks of cold dinners and empty conversations. 3 weeks of feeling like a stranger in my own home. I drove on autopilot, my mind reeling with the implications of unemployment, the mortgage, Emma's college fund, the family vacation we'd planned for next month, all of it crumbling like a house of cards. I needed someone to talk to, someone who would understand. Dad had always been my anchor, the one person who believed in me unconditionally. Even when I'd struggled in school, even when I'd made mistakes, he'd been there with advice and encouragement. His house looked smaller than I remembered as I pulled into the driveway. The garden he'd been so proud of was overgrown, the paint on the shutters peeling. At 78, he was slowing down, but his mind remained sharp as ever. "Sarah." He opened the door before I could knock, his weathered face creased with concern. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" The dam broke. 15 years of bottled-up stress, disappointment, and now this final humiliation poured out of me in broken sentences and hiccuping sobs. Dad listened without interruption, his arm around my shoulders as we sat on his worn leather couch. "I don't know what I did wrong," I finished, wiping my nose with a tissue from the box he'd wordlessly handed me. "I gave them everything. I was loyal. I was dedicated." Dad was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the armrest, a habit I'd inherited from him. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, colder. "You know what your problem is, Sarah?" I looked up, expecting comfort, expecting the pep talk he'd given me countless times before. "You're weak." The words hit like a physical blow. I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "Dad, 15 years, and you let some kid push you out? You just packed up your little box and walked away like a whipped dog." His eyes, once warm and encouraging, were now filled with something I'd never seen before: disgust. "I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice. You chose to be a victim." He stood up, his movements sharp with agitation. "I raised you to be a fighter, and you turned into this, a failure." The word hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Failure. The one thing I'd spent my entire life trying not to be. "Your mother would be ashamed," he continued, each word a knife twist. "She built her own business from nothing while raising 3 kids. She never would have let some spoiled brat steal what was hers." "Mom died when I was 12, I whispered. "I barely remember her. Maybe if you'd been more like her, you wouldn't be sitting here crying over a job you were too weak to keep." I stood on unsteady legs, the room spinning around me. This wasn't my father. This wasn't the man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd helped with homework, who'd walked me down the aisle at my wedding. "I should go." "Yes, you should. And don't come back until you've found some backbone." The drive home was a blur of tears and rage. My father's words echoed in my head, mixing with the memory of Patricia's dismissive smile and Marcus's fake sympathy. Weak. Failure. The words became a chant, a drumbeat of shame that pounded in rhythm with my heartbeat. The house was dark when I pulled into the garage. David's car was missing, another late night at the office. I sat in my car for several minutes, gathering the strength to face the emptiness inside. Emma was at her friend's house for a sleepover, which was probably for the best. I couldn't handle her questions right now, couldn't pretend everything was fine when my world had imploded in the span of a few hours. I poured myself a glass of wine, then another, and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the termination letter I'd crumpled and smoothed out a dozen times. The legal language was cold and impersonal, reducing 15 years of dedication to a few paragraphs about business restructuring and workforce optimization. The sound of the garage door opening jolted me from my stupor. David was home finally. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, the sound of his briefcase dropping in the hallway. "Sarah?" He appeared in the kitchen doorway, loosening his tie. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" I turned on the overhead light, squinting against the sudden brightness. David looked tired, his usually perfect hair disheveled, his shirt wrinkled. "I lost my job today." He stopped mid-motion, his hands frozen on his tie. For a moment, neither of us spoke. What happened? I told him everything. Patricia's cold dismissal, Marcus's betrayal, the humiliating security escort. I waited for comfort, for outrage on my behalf, for some sign that my husband of 16 years still cared about my pain. Instead, he sighed and ran his hands through his hair. I can't do this anymore, Sarah. Can't do what? This. Us. He gestured vaguely around the kitchen, encompassing our entire life together. I've been thinking about this for months, and today, it confirms what I already knew. The words didn't register at first. They seemed to bounce off some protective barrier my mind had erected against further devastation. You've been thinking about what? I want a divorce. The barrier shattered. The wine glass slipped from my numb fingers, exploding against the tile floor in a shower of crystal and merlot. A divorce! The word felt foreign on my tongue. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I'll be staying at Tom's place until we can figure out the details. His voice was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing a business transaction. But why? What did I do? It's not what you did. It's what you've become. He looked at me with something approaching pity. When did you become so ordinary? So defeated? The woman I married had dreams, ambitions. She was going to change the world. I've been working 60-hour weeks to build our future. You've been hiding, using work as an excuse to avoid dealing with the fact that you've given up on everything that mattered to you. He shook his head. I fell in love with a fire, Sarah. You're just smoke now. So you're leaving? Just like that? On the same day I lost my job. I know the timing isn't ideal, but I can't pretend anymore. I can't watch you settle for mediocrity for the rest of my life. 16 years of marriage and I'm mediocre? Look at yourself, Sarah. Really look. When was the last time you took a risk? When was the last time you fought for something you wanted? You've become a passenger in your own life. He moved toward the hallway, then paused. I'll pick up my things this weekend when Emma's at soccer practice. We'll need to tell her soon. David, please, we can fix this. I can change. But he was already gone, leaving me alone with the broken glass and the wreckage of my life. I don't remember cleaning up the wine or going to bed. I don't remember the hours that passed between David walking out and Emma bursting through the front door the next morning, chattering about her sleepover and asking for pancakes. I made the pancakes on autopilot, my mind numb with shock. Emma didn't seem to notice that only 2 plates were on the table. Didn't ask where Dad was. At 14, she was used to his absences. Mom, you look weird, she said around a mouthful of syrup-soaked pancake. Just tired, sweetheart. Are you sick? Something like that. She studied my face with the intensity only teenagers could muster. Did something happen at work? The question broke something loose inside my chest. Emma was my daughter, my baby, and I couldn't bear to add my failures to her perfect Saturday morning. Everything's fine, I lied. I'm just not feeling well. She nodded, apparently satisfied, and returned her attention to her breakfast. I watched her eat, memorizing the way her hair fell across her face, the small scar on her chin from when she'd fallen off her bike at age 7. Soon she'd know the truth. Soon her world would change too. After Emma left for soccer practice, I found myself standing in my home office, looking at the awards on the wall. Employee of the Year, 3 consecutive times. Outstanding Achievement in Marketing Excellence. Client Service Above and Beyond. Each plaque represented months of 18-hour days, missed dinners, sacrificed weekends. And for what? So Marcus could swoop in and claim credit for my work? So Patricia could dismiss me like an outdated piece of equipment? My laptop sat open on the desk, still logged into my personal cloud storage. 15 years of files, contacts, strategies, campaign proposals. All of it still there, still mine, despite what had happened at the office. An idea began to form. I opened a new browser tab and searched for starting a marketing consultancy. Page after page of articles appeared, filled with advice about leveraging existing relationships, building a client base, and competing against larger firms. I thought about the Henderson account, how I'd landed them after months of research and relationship building. Mrs. Henderson had specifically asked for me by name when they'd signed the contract. What would she say if she knew I was no longer with the company? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Sarah, this is Jennifer from Coastal Realty. I heard through the grapevine about what happened at Morrison and Associates. Are you taking on freelance work? We have a campaign that could really use your expertise." Then another. "Sarah, it's Michael from TechStart Solutions. Patricia called to tell us about the transition, but we specifically want to work with you. Would you be interested in discussing a consulting arrangement?" And another. And another. Word was spreading through my professional network faster than office gossip. And the response wasn't sympathy, it was opportunity. I spent the weekend researching, planning, and strategizing. I registered a domain name, Sterling Marketing Solutions. I designed a logo, created a basic website, and drafted proposals for 3 potential clients who had already reached out. By Sunday evening, I had the framework for my own business and a growing list of contacts who wanted to work with me directly rather than through Morrison and Associates. Monday morning, I called Jennifer from Coastal Realty. "Sarah, I'm so glad you called. We've been waiting for the right moment to leave Morrison and Associates anyway. Their work has become so corporate, soulless. We want that personal touch you always brought to our campaigns. I'd love to discuss your needs. When would be a good time to meet? How about this afternoon? And Sarah, bring a contract. We're ready to sign." The meeting went better than I could have hoped. Not only did Coastal Realty sign on as my first official client, but Jennifer introduced me to 2 other business owners who were looking for marketing support. By the end of the week, I had 5 clients and more inquiries than I could handle alone. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to destroy my career, Patricia had actually freed me to build something bigger and better than I ever could have imagined while trapped in corporate middle management. But success felt hollow when I came home to an empty house each night. Emma was staying with David more frequently, and the silence was deafening. I threw myself into work, often staying up until 2 in the morning crafting campaigns and strategies. 3 weeks after starting Sterling Marketing Solutions, I received a call that changed everything. "Sarah, this is Richard Morrison." I nearly dropped my phone. Richard Morrison was the founder and CEO of Morrison and Associates, Patricia's boss, and one of the most respected figures in the industry. "Mr. Morrison, this is unexpected. I'll get straight to the point. I've been hearing some interesting things about your new venture, and some very concerning things about what's been happening in my company since your departure." My heart pounded. "Oh, the Henderson account just fired us. Apparently, the young man who took over your responsibilities showed up to a client lunch venue where they serve Thai food. Mrs. Henderson ended up in the emergency room with anaphylactic shock." I winced. I'd specifically warned Marcus about her peanut allergy. "I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Because I suspect you're also the reason Coastal Realty, TechStart Solutions, and Premier Financial all terminated their contracts with us last week. That's nearly $2 million in lost revenue." I chose my words carefully. "I can't control where clients choose to spend their money, Mr. Morrison. No, but you can influence it, and you have been—" His voice was sharp with accusation. "You've been systematically poaching our clients." "I've been responding to inquiries from businesses that specifically sought me out," I replied calmly. "If they're choosing to leave Morrison and Associates, perhaps that says more about the quality of service they were receiving." There was a long pause. When he spoke again, His tone had shifted from accusatory to calculating. Patricia tells me you were terminated for performance issues. Patricia lied. She also tells me that Marcus developed all the strategies and campaigns you were taking credit for. Marcus is a plagiarist, and an incompetent one at that. The Henderson incident proves it. Another pause. I'd like to meet with you, today if possible. I'm afraid I'm quite busy with my own clients now. Name your price. The words hung in the air between us. 3 weeks ago, I would have jumped at the chance to get my job back. 3 weeks ago, I was weak. I'm not interested in returning to Morrison and Associates, Mr. Morrison, but I am interested in discussing a partnership. A partnership? Sterling Marketing Solutions could serve as a specialized boutique arm of your agency. High-end, personalized service for your premium clients. You keep the corporate accounts. I handle the relationships that require a more personal touch. I could practically hear his mind working through the implications. He'd get to retain the clients I'd taken while saving face about my departure. I'd get legitimacy and access to resources I couldn't build on my own. What kind of terms are we talking about? 50-50 revenue split on any accounts I bring in or take over. Complete creative and strategic control over my campaigns. And Marcus gets reassigned to a different department. That's quite a demand. That's my offer. Take it or watch more clients walk out the door. We met that afternoon in his corner office, the same building where I'd been humiliated and dismissed less than a month earlier. But this time I wasn't carrying a cardboard box. This time I was carrying a contract that would make me a partner in one of the city's most successful marketing firms. The negotiation lasted 3 hours. When we shook hands, I had everything I'd asked for, plus a few additional benefits I hadn't even thought to request. As I walked through the office toward the elevator, I passed my old cubicle. Marcus was hunched over his computer, looking stressed and overwhelmed. The awards that had once hung on my walls were now stacked in a corner, replaced by his energy drink collection. He looked up as I passed, his face a mixture of confusion and fear. "Sarah? I heard, are you coming back?" I paused, considering my response. 3 weeks ago, I would have avoided confrontation. 3 weeks ago, I was weak. In a way, I smiled. I'll be working with the premium accounts from now on. Quality over quantity. You understand. His face went pale. The Henderson account has already signed with Sterling Marketing Solutions, along with several others you managed to alienate. I leaned against his desk, enjoying the way he flinched. But don't worry, Marcus. I'm sure there are plenty of small local businesses that could use your unique approach to client relations. I left him sputtering and continued toward the elevator, where Patricia was waiting with a forced smile that couldn't hide the fury in her eyes. "Sarah, congratulations on your arrangement with Richard." "Thank you, Patricia. I appreciate everything you did to make this possible." Her smile faltered. "Everything I did? Well, if you hadn't terminated me, I never would have had the motivation to start my own company. And if you hadn't chosen Marcus to replace me, our clients never would have seen the contrast between real expertise and—" I shrugged. "Whatever it is Marcus brings to the table." The elevator arrived with a soft ding. As the doors closed between us, I saw Patricia's carefully composed mask finally slip, revealing the panic underneath. The transformation was complete, but there were still 2 conversations I needed to have. I found Dad in his garden, wrestling with an overgrown rose bush. He looked up as I approached, his expression guarded. "Sarah." "Dad." We stood in awkward silence for a moment, the memory of our last conversation hanging between us like a wall. "I heard you started your own business," he said finally. "You heard correctly. And that Morrison wants to partner with you." Also correct. He set down his pruning, shears, and really looked at me for the first time in weeks. Something in my posture, my expression, or maybe just my presence seemed to register with him. You look different. I am different. I was wrong, he said quietly. What I said to you that night, I was wrong. You're not weak. You never were. No, Dad, you were right. I sat on the old wooden bench he'd built for Mom before she died. I was weak. I was settling. I was hiding behind my job and my responsibilities instead of actually living my life. Sarah, but I'm not anymore. I met his eyes. I'm not the woman who let herself get pushed around and discarded. I'm not the woman who accepted scraps and called it success. That woman is gone. He sat beside me, his weathered hands folding in his lap. I'm proud of you. I know you are, and I forgive you for what you said. You were grieving Mom's memory, watching me waste the potential she'd given me. I understand that now. We sat in comfortable silence as the sun set behind the overgrown hedges. Father and daughter reconciled through mutual understanding rather than simple forgiveness. The final conversation was the hardest. David agreed to meet me at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory where we could talk without the emotional weight of our shared history pressing down on us. He looked good, rested, happier than I'd seen him in years. The realization didn't hurt as much as I'd expected it to. You look... He paused, searching for the right word. Different. Alive. He smiled ruefully. Like the woman I married. Just in time to divorce her, apparently. Sarah. It's okay, David. You were right, too. I stirred my coffee absently. I had become ordinary. I had settled. I was hiding from my own potential because it was easier than risking failure. I didn't mean to be cruel about it. Yes, you did. And I needed you to be. I looked up at him. We've been married 16 years, and it took losing everything for me to remember who I actually was underneath all the compromise and accommodation. So what happens now? Now we figure out how to be the best divorced parents we can be. Emma deserves that much from us. He nodded, relief evident in his expression. She's proud of you, you know. She keeps talking about how cool it is that her mom started her own company. She's the only thing I got right in all those years of settling. That's not true. His voice was gentle. You built something remarkable at Morrison. You just never claimed credit for it. Well, I'm claiming credit now. We worked out the practical details of our divorce over the next hour. Custody, finances, the house. It was remarkably civil, probably because we were both finally being honest about what we wanted. As we prepared to leave, David caught my hand. I hope you find someone who appreciates the fire in you. I hope you find someone who doesn't require you to manage their flame. We parted as friends, maybe for the first time in years. 6 months later, I was preparing for the biggest presentation of my career. Sterling Marketing Solutions had been approached by a consortium of international brands looking to break into the North American market. It was exactly the kind of high-stakes, high-reward project I dreamed of handling back in my corporate days. The irony was perfect. Morrison and Associates had been competing for the same contract and had been eliminated in the first round. Apparently, Marcus's presentation had included several factual errors and a proposal to target young millennials with a campaign about vinyl records and artisanal coffee. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror in my hotel suite, adjusting my suit jacket and checking my presentation notes one final time. In a few hours, I would either land the contract that would establish Sterling Marketing Solutions as a major player in the industry, or I would face the kind of professional rejection that would have destroyed the old Sarah. But I wasn't the old Sarah anymore. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Good luck today, Mom. Show them how awesome you are. Another from Dad. Your mother would be proud. Give them hell, sweetheart. Even David had sent encouragement. You've got this, Sarah. Knock 'em dead. I smiled, tucked my phone into my purse, and headed for the elevator. Win or lose, I was no longer defined by other people's opinions of my worth. I was no longer willing to accept less than I deserved or to let others take credit for my achievements. The woman who had sat in Patricia's office 6 months ago, clutching a termination letter and questioning her own value, was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who had learned that sometimes the greatest gift you can receive is having your safety net ripped away, forcing you to discover you had wings all along. The presentation went flawlessly. 3 days later, I received a call offering me the contract, a 3-year deal worth more than I'd earned in my entire 15-year tenure at Morrison & Associates. That evening, I took Emma out for dinner to celebrate. As we sat across from each other in our favorite restaurant, she looked at me with those serious 14-year-old eyes and asked the question I'd been dreading. Mom, are you happier now? I considered lying, giving her some comforting platitude about how everything worked out for the best. Instead, I chose honesty. Yes, sweetheart, I'm happier now. Even though Dad left, even though Grandpa was mean to you, even though you lost your job, especially because of all that. I reached across the table and took her hand. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best thing, because it forces you to stop settling for less than you deserve. She nodded thoughtfully. Like when Jennifer Morrison pushed me off the monkey bars in 3rd grade, and I learned I was strong enough to get back up and do them by myself. Exactly like that. So you're not sad anymore? I'm not sad anymore. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, it was completely true. Later that night, as I worked on campaign proposals for my newest client, I thought about the chain of events that had brought me to this point. Patricia's betrayal, Marcus's incompetence, Dad's harsh words, David's departure. Each had been a necessary catalyst, pushing me further from the safety of mediocrity toward the uncertain territory of my own potential. I'd spent 15 years being grateful for scraps, accepting less than I was worth, and calling it success. I'd let others define my value and my limitations, had chosen security over growth, comfort over achievement. The woman I was now understood something the old Sarah never had. Sometimes revenge isn't about hurting the people who wronged you. Sometimes the best revenge is becoming so successful, so fulfilled, so undeniably magnificent that their betrayal becomes the greatest favor they ever did you. My laptop chimed with a new email notification. The subject line made me smile. Sarah Sterling, Forbes 40 Under 40, nomination. Well, technically, 42 under 40, but who was counting? I opened the message and began reading about my nomination for the prestigious list, recognition for building sterling marketing solutions into one of the fastest-growing boutique agencies in the country. The accompanying article would feature my story, the marketing executive who turned a career catastrophe into entrepreneurial success. At the bottom of the email was a note from the journalist who would be writing the profile. We'd love to include quotes from your former employer about your time at Morrison & Associates. Do you have contact information for Patricia Williams? I leaned back in my chair and laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, that revenge comes with a side of poetic justice. I closed the laptop and headed to bed, already looking forward to tomorrow. There were new clients to pursue, new challenges to tackle, new heights to reach. The old Sarah would have been afraid of failing. The new Sarah was excited about the possibility of succeeding beyond her wildest dreams. And that, I realized, made all the difference in the world.